After everything we went through in 2020, it's hard to remember that 2019 was a challenging year for Ohio farmers. The fifth wettest season on record delayed planting and harvest times. A U.S. trade war with China reduced demand for agricultural products, lowering commodity prices. And farmland costs were rising thanks to a booming non-farm economy. It was, to be frank, a year that tested the limits of what our farming sector could handle. What did those challenges mean for Ohio farmers? And how did they respond to the stress? I'm Stacey Cochran with the Knowledge Exchange. On today's podcast, we're exploring a new statewide poll that captured farmer experiences in 2019. We welcome the researchers to share the details behind their survey.
I'm Doug Jackson-Smith. I'm a professor in the School of Environment and Natural Resources in the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences here at Ohio State.
Hi, I'm Shoshanah Inwood. I'm a rural sociologist and assistant professor.
I'm Andrea Rissing. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher.
How did this perfect storm of weather and price shocks affect farmers? To find out, researchers from the School of Environment and Natural Resources created the Ohio Farm Poll. The statewide survey asked farmers about their sources of stress, how they coped, and the impact on their farm business. Doug, in this survey, you asked questions that explored feelings and emotions, not just facts and figures. How do you capture that in a survey?
You know, there's decades of experience and work in the social sciences about how to think about capturing things that are related to attitudes, perceptions, opinions. We believe real qualities that people contain, and there's systematic ways to go about asking questions that give us information in a way that's valid and reliable, that can tell us a lot about what people value, what they prioritize, what are the issues that animate them, and how do we sift between different issues to understand the things that are most stressful or most important.
Right now, especially within the state of Ohio, we have no systematic survey methods that happen on any kind of regular timeline to really capture how these lived experiences are changing for Ohio's farmers and farm families.
The research team sent the survey in February of 2020, right before the words global pandemic entered the scene. Their goal? To understand what stressed farmers the most in 2019. The team randomly sampled some of the 77,000 farmers in Ohio. They targeted a variety of farmers, those with small, medium, and large farms based on sales, and farmers producing every kind of crop and livestock to get a good representation. An overwhelming 41% of those surveyed responded.
Farms that raise livestock are different than farms that raise crops when it comes to the impact of weather. Or a trade war over grains is going to affect grain producers, but not vegetable producers. And so it's key to get an accurate characterization of the type of farm, but also the type of farm family. Is this a person who's 70 years old with no kids on the operation and no prospect for a farm transition? Is it a mid-career operator that has a multifamily structure? Is it someone who just got in and is learning the ropes?
Survey results highlight three important takeaways. First, the challenges farmers faced in 2019 stressed the farm sector, revealing strengths and weaknesses. Second, Ohio is agriculturally diverse, with farms of every type and size across the state. But that means farmers felt the price and weather shocks very differently, depending on their place in the industry. And third, farm survival is closely tied to the well-being of both the farm household and the farm business. The survey was intended to find out how farmers felt about and adapted to the stressors in 2019. What did you find?
Over half of them experienced worse business conditions than usual. Over half had delayed planting due to extreme weather. About 40% experienced a significant drop in yield and or the prices that they received for their commodities. And 20% of the households had a major health crisis in the household. And it underscores that the 2019 in particular was a year in which farm businesses and farm households were experiencing quite a bit of stress.
What our survey was able to capture those disasters and disruptions that so often hit agriculture, which is going to be the weather events and trade issues. And so we really have the opportunity to see how our households responding.
It's interesting that you mentioned farm businesses and farm households were stressed. That's another important result from your survey, right?
A question where we asked about the major sources of stress for Ohio farms. So we had a big long list of questions just asking folks which of these stressed you out last year. 2019 being the wettest year on record, unsurprisingly, weather was the top stressor. And right around 33% of farmers reported things like farmland costs were stressful, market prices were stressful, healthcare costs were stressful. So we actually saw that 35% of Ohio farmers said that healthcare costs were stressful or very stressful. So we're really seeing the household side of farm business viability and success coming through here.
We know that finally that the well-being and resilience of farms was very much related to the well-being of households. So as I said before, some of the big impacts that happened on those farms were impacts to members of the family that didn't directly have to do with the farm business, but had major consequences on their well-being and their ability to survive. Family farms are both households and businesses, and that joint quality of it means that sources of stress from healthcare costs and access to good community services is on a par with the kinds of stress that farmers felt in 2019 about farm prices or access to farm markets.
How farm families responded to the different stressors showed up in the survey as well. Farmers mentioned delaying purchases for the household and farm business. They reduced household expenses, and they dipped into household savings to bolster the farm business.
When we're talking about ideas around farm sustainability, we're most comfortable talking about the ideas around economic and environmental sustainability. Those are really much easier concepts for us to grasp. And we know that that third leg of the stool, social sustainability, is important. So some of these indicators that we have, like health insurance, are ways that we can actually start to understand how is the household doing in the way that it's so connected to the farm business and to farm profitability and to viability and to growing that next generation of farmers.
I want to talk about that idea some more. This has to be a delicate issue for our farm families, admitting they were stressed.
Yeah, and it really just reminds us that the stresses facing the farming population don't stop at the farmhouse door. And if we're going to try to support farmers, that means supporting all aspects of the farm household as well as the farm business.
And I think maybe one of our hopes is that we can start to give folks language and indicators so that people become a lot more comfortable with talking about these household issues, because for so long in programming and policy work, we only focus on the economics and the physical acts of production.
Doug, when looking at the issue of household and farm well-being, another facet of that is thinking about the future of the farm. Your survey asked about the next generation and their ability to take over the farm, what that future looks like.
I think on the one hand, there's remarkable resilience given the difficulties we've outlined, the stressors they face, the things that have been thrown at them over the years. Most farmers are optimistic and engaged in the future of their operations, and things are going well. On the other hand, I think it is very difficult for farmers to feel optimistic when they keep getting set back. And there's great high levels of concern about their ability to transition their farms to that next generation of farmers, the cost of farmland, the high capital costs, and the willingness of that next generation to assume these very difficult challenges as part of the cost of having what everyone recognizes is a wonderful lifestyle and a wonderful way to live and raise a family and work on farms in Ohio.
We as a state and as a nation are having this crisis of who's going to be the next generation of farmers. And so really being able to key in on what are the issues, the challenges, but also the successes of our young and beginning farmers in the state is going to be something really important for us to keep our eye on and to see where we need to be making investments and what's working and maybe what we need to disinvest from and what we need to change.
I'd like to dig into the mechanics of creating a survey like this. Andrea, you've been involved with the whole process. Where do you begin?
So it started with the three of us, Doug, Shoshanah, and me, thinking about the big questions that we wanted to know about how farmers experience this stressful year, what they're doing in response, what issues they care about, and then coming up with the most precise, clear language that we could in order to get those data.
And also recognizing that there's a real diversity of farmers across the state. We really wanted to capture some of those differences across regions and also with different types of farmers.
A well-designed survey can be a really critical way to put your finger on the pulse of the community. You need to get clear answers to clear questions from a representative cross-section of the industry for you to be able to put any stock in those numbers.
Researchers tested the survey with actual farmers to make sure the questions are stated in a way to avoid confusion and misunderstanding. They also reviewed similar studies so they could compare their findings. By looking at other research, they could track how farm families adapted to stress or changed their behavior over time.
We also did a lot of research into who's been asking questions about farm stress. We really replicated a lot of the questions that have been tested and validated in numerous other studies. So that gives us a lot of confidence in the accuracy of the data that we have to report out.
Our work has gotten a lot harder in the era of political polling and marketing, where people get polls and surveys that aren't real polls and surveys. They're designed to achieve an objective. It's critical for us to convey to the respondent that we have their interests at heart. We're going out to find out what is going on.
We know that broadband access in rural areas can be an issue. How did you survey the farmers?
So we opted to go with a mail survey. Mail surveys are how we long relied on for surveying with farmers, partly because for the farm population as a whole, not everybody is online, not everybody is responsive to email. So for rural populations and farmers, mail surveys are still the gold standard. And so we felt like if we did a solid scientific mail survey, we would be able to get high response rates and good, clear, reliable results.
We have a substantial Amish population within the state that is farming, and there's no way that we could get any responses for them through an online survey only. And so this really increased the ability to get a wider range of voices of our farm population.
I know the survey was focused on 2019, but Ohio farmers were surveyed at the beginning of the COVID crisis. Does the stress and uncertainty of that time show up in your survey results?
That's a great question and something we think a lot about. We haven't yet really systematically compared the results that came in on the early side with results that came in on the backside to see if they were changing. But anyone who lived through Ohio in March and April of 2020 knows that those were very strange and very difficult times. We invited people to write comments about COVID in the last wave of the survey. We did not get many comments back. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of the surveys we got back were completed and returned before the realities of what COVID meant, especially in rural Ohio and on farms in Ohio, had really set in.
Do you have plans to continue this survey in the future?
We obviously hope to be able to set the baseline for something that we could do again. And it's really helpful to be able to track the same households through time or to track just general changes in the industry through time to answer important questions about how people are impacted and how they respond and what that does in terms of their well-being and outcome and farm viability.
Especially if we are able to make the Ohio Farm Poll a reoccurring poll and have it go out every other year. One of the things I know we're excited about is serving as kind of a resource for other departments at Ohio State or even other organizations to get, a question or two on the 2023 Ohio Farm Poll.
And by having that consistent, reliable data source, that would actually enable us to act a little bit faster and maybe to preempt some issues before they really become so large that they become really difficult to deal with. We can actually start to see issues starting to emerge within the data that might give us some clues of where we need to be a little bit more attentive to and responsive to.
The response to the Ohio Farm Poll shows farmers are eager for decision makers and others to understand the realities they face. Researchers hope the lessons learned from 2019 can guide strategies to help strengthen the sector for the next year of unpredictable markets and wild weather.
I'd like to finish up with one last comment, and that's really that none of this would have been possible without the active willingness and participation of almost 1,000 Ohio farmers and their ability to take the time out of their busy and chaotic and difficult farm and household lives to fill out a survey from Ohio State University is the thing that made all of this possible. I hope we do justice to that investment that they've made in us by giving back some things of value to them.
To learn more about the survey, visit our website at kx.osu.edu and search Ohio Farm Poll. I'm Stacy Cochran with the Knowledge Exchange. Thanks for listening.